Tell us how this project started and where you ended up, because where you ended up is not where you thought you were going to when you started this thing.
No, it went from breaking away to breaking bad. But I think it was a situation where it started as a film where I was going to follow Lance Armstrong for his comeback year. You know, he had been in retirement. 2009. 2009. He had been in retirement. Now, as an old man, 38, he was going to come back and show the young kids, you know, how it was done. And I thought that was an interesting film, and I would follow him throughout the year. I was interested in his will. You know, we know his will as the cancer survivor, coming back, cheating death, and also maybe the darker side of his will. Maybe I suspected that he would, you know, do anything to win.
So when you started this, so much of it is about rebuilding his brand and who his name was. And then in the end, it was his brand, his name getting destroyed. How did he change as an individual when you interacted with him, I would say before and after?
I'm not sure he changed enough. I mean, I think one of the things we're all trying to reckon with is whether or not Lance will come to grips with just how severely he's disappointed all of us. He had created this fantastic story. You know, the film is really about the anatomy of a lie, but the lie was so big. You know, he didn't just say, look, I've never tested positive. He said, how dare you say that I,
the Lance Armstrong,
as a cancer survivor, would ever use performance-enhancing drugs. Now, that's a way of kind of implicating cancer survivors around the world in that lie.
Well, your film is a monument, if you will, to Lance Armstrong's lies and the truth that we've now learned. He didn't just, I mean, we know that he lied to everybody, but he lied to you personally on camera, and we have a clip of just that happening. Have a look at this.
You know, I know what I did and didn't do, so therefore I sleep at night. And I'm one of the greatest writers of all time.
So, Alex, when Lance said these things to you, at the time, 2009, did you believe them?
Well, look, you know, I have to be honest and say this, Lance Armstrong is not the first person who's lied to me. After all, I did a film on Enron, as you may recall. And so I suspected that Lance had doped before, but you couldn't say that out loud. But he did.
Why? Why did you? Yeah.
Yeah, and how strong was your suspicion?
Look, if you looked at the 7 years that he had won the Tour de France, all the people who shared the podium with him in those 7 years, save one, had been popped at one time or another for doping. So you think, well, is it really possible that Lance is the only one who's clean and he's that much better than everybody else who's doping? It seemed pretty unlikely.
So now that the film has come on to the other side, has Lance tried to stop it?
No. You know, I think that part of Lance is interesting. He's sort of like, okay, you know, bring it on. It's like...
Really?
Yeah.
Even though he knows, like, there he is looking at you saying, I'm just one of the greatest writers of all time. He wouldn't go to extraordinary lengths to stop this narrative from getting out there. I mean, he has to want to rebuild his name in some way.
Well, I think part of rebuilding his name is coming clean. The problem people are having is he's not coming clean all the way. I mean, he called me up maybe a month or so before his Oprah confession, and he said, look, it's all true. I did dope. I did lie to you. I apologize. And then I began to say, look, you owe me an opportunity to go back and talk about it again. So that's how he was going to make it right. Try to make it right.
Talk to me about the motivation. Why do you think he did this? Is it the money, the more than $200 million he took in? Was it pride? Was it ego?
I think it was all those things. I mean, look, at some point, the big lie sold a lot more effectively than the guy who was just a winning cyclist.
Does that make him no different from Bernie Madoff?
I think he's different from Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff was always running a scam. Lance Armstrong, I think,
and Bernie was taking down so many others.
Well, Lance Armstrong took down an entire sport.
Bernie Madoff and Lance Armstrong are two different things.
I think so, too. I mean, there are people, you know, Betsy Andreu, who is kind of the Aaron Brockovich of this story, calls sometimes, she calls Lance the Bernie Madoff of cycling. But I think what makes Lance, Bernie Madoff never really had a business. Lance is an athlete. I think he's a legitimate athlete, and I think he was the best of a bad era, but it's the lie. And the way he went after people, that's what's...
Bernie never ever had a business at all?
Before we let you run, Alex, should he be allowed to compete in triathlons?
I think there's a rough justice to this story. It's not, you know, there's no pure perfect justice, but I think rough justice has been served. The question is, for most people, what's next for Lance? Will he finally show us the confession?
Not a Nike endorsement.
Likely not.